Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community. Well, it's a pleasure to have my good friend Andres, also from the F3 community, on our Success Story Hour or half hour. And Andres, it's a Friday morning. It's early. There aren't many people up right now, and it's kind of dark outside now that it's in the fall.
Yes.
So thank you so much for making this Friday especially special, having you on as a friend and as a client. So let's get into it.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Jerry.
Oh, yeah. So, Andres, tell us about your athletic history, kind of things you did growing up. We'll go into that a little bit.
So I'm from Venezuela originally, and when you're from Venezuela, you either play soccer or baseball. And so I played soccer all my life, grew up playing soccer in middle school, high school. In college, played, intramural leagues. And then in my mid-20s, started playing in some adult competitive leagues in D.C. and just began to get injured, pulled groin, quad, hammy. And then I was also doing some calisthenics. I was doing P90X. I was doing these things.
Back in the
P90X.
Everyone's tried P90X at some point.
It was definitely, I remember I had to pull a bar at the door. But what happened is I would have these stints where I would kind of have 3 months of just really doing something, and then I would have an injury.
Yes.
And so it was my shoulder, it was my groin, it was something. And then I would just kind of be completely just not doing anything for 6 months.
Yeah.
And basically, this was the cycle I went from my 20s, mid-20s, 25, to my late 30s, early 40s.
So basically, it sounds like a lot of people in their 20s do is they say, oh, it'll get better on its own, and probably did after some rest, which is good. And now that you and I are not in our 30s anymore,
yes,
we'll just say, things have changed. So
yes.
Tell us what you've noticed in your maybe 30s and 40s.
Well, one thing was recovery. I remember my early days playing soccer. If I twisted an ankle, within a few days, I was back at it, right? When I was twisted an ankle in my 30s, I was out for a few weeks, if not longer. Mm-hmm. And then also injuries tend to just happen quicker. I guess I never fully healed, especially my right shoulder, which we've worked on a lot here.
Definitely.
It's been decades of just having a right shoulder that wasn't fully healed. And so I think it was just getting injury. And also just psychologically, it made me scared to go after some activities. I'm not super competitive, but I like pushing myself to a limit.
Yeah, you want to push.
And so I felt like I couldn't do that much. And I think it was also not having the kind of support that you've given me to kind of coach me to kind of how to push myself to a point where I don't injure myself. And having that kind of support, something that I didn't have on my own.
Yeah. I think the cool part, and before we go into that, let's talk about life in F3 as far as how did that contribute to where your fitness level was before I saw you?
Yeah, no, so I came across F3 thanks to Orphan. Shout out Orphan if you're hearing this. We all have nicknames. Mine's Discount. I don't know if your audience knows, but so I got into it because I had just moved to, I had just started coming out of my house after the pandemic, and I met David, whose nickname is Orphan. And he said, hey, you're in the area. There's a group called F3, Fitness, Faith, and Fellowship, and check it out. You might be interested. And I'm a morning person. I'm up all the time. So that's why 6 a.m., I've been up since 3. So it's all good. So I was but nobody's up at that early. Nobody goes out. And so it's here's a group of men who are committed to kind of being there for each other, that want to work out together at 5:30. And by the time you're done, it's 6:15, and you've worked out for the day.
Yeah.
I was in. So I started working out March of last year. So it's been over a year.
Yeah.
And again, it was great because I could modify, and it was all body weight calisthenic stuff, so I really enjoyed that. But again, it's also high repetition. So also after doing 100 Merkins or push-ups for your audience, right? My shoulder would start to bother me, or my for squats. So I was able to kind of modify, but again, I noticed myself some injuries from time to time.
Yeah, and it's a common story that we hear from guys who do a lot of high intensity work, whether it's bodyweight conditioning, whether it's stuff that's CrossFit, and there's nothing wrong with CrossFit per se, but I think sometimes as people get older, our bodies do change.
Yep.
Our mobility does decrease if we're not working maybe some of the shortcomings that we have or deficits that we already have in our joints.
Yes.
So you add intensity with time, and you add age in there, and things can sometimes go awry.
Yeah. No, I did go to PT prior to finding you, right? And again, I think what happened was it was just kind of during the session it was nice, but then I was left on my own and just didn't feel like it was this kind of support that I had here. And I did try acupuncture, I did try other physical therapists, but I feel like this is the first time in decades where I feel I've seen how I've increased my strength. I look different. I've gained muscle mass. And so that's something that I've also really enjoyed. And I'm also more aware now of like, my limits in the way that I wasn't before.
Yeah. So talk to us about what maybe the traditional physical therapy place was like for you when you went to those places.
I went to another physical therapist in the Raleigh area. And again, when I was there, it was like very nice, similar, like, he showed me some activities, he would do some assessments, he would maybe do some movements, but like, and then he'd tell me, okay, I'm going to give you some exercises for you to do at home, and then I'll see you in a month. And it was just a kind of like very transactional in that regard, for sure. And he was nice enough, but it just felt like, just kind of a mechanical shop. You come in, you get treated, and then you go out, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I did maybe get a little better, but very quickly I got re-injured. And it didn't, I wasn't able to sustain any change.
Yeah, that's a common story that we hear from people who've tried the traditional model. And I think sometimes in that model, the PTs are well-intended.
Yes.
I do think that there is a lack of time sometimes, and they've got maybe 3 or 4 patients an hour, so it's hard to really dive into finding what the root cause problem is for their patients. And you and I have both found that sometimes it's multiple issues.
Yeah.
And if you only got 15 minutes with a patient, there's just no way that you can dive in and say, what's really going on here?
Well, and that's what really impressed me when I came here. I did the free assessment, and within 20 minutes, just like you have such good bedside manners, if you will, So I was like, I really felt listened and seen. And so that after the free assessment, like, let me do the full assessment for the hour or hour and a half. Like, you sat down with me, you go through all these things. I also was so impressed by the technology. Like, you had your iPad taking pictures and like doing all these things. And I had never done dry needling before. And I was like, whoa, like I'd done acupuncture, but not dry needling with the electric shocks.
Yeah.
And I just saw the difference in like within that first assessment.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like if I can see the improvements in my body in that hour. If I keep coming back to this, like I will get better. So it was like that interaction. Now it took me a year to come back just because I had to make sure that the funding and all that stuff, the investment was, I could do it.
Yeah.
But definitely, I'm so glad that I did.
And I'm so glad you said that, because health is an investment.
Yes.
And I think that you sometimes get what you pay for, where, you might be paying a 20-hour copay going somewhere else. But if you're getting 10, 15 minutes of treatment or one-on-one time with a therapist there, and they haven't even dived into what's going on, you're kind of just wasting time and resources.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, like I wish, like what I had paid the other PT, I just like, what I would have known about you, because that investment would have been sooner here. Because it's, the saying, health is wealth.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if you have all the millions in the world. If you're not healthy, you can't enjoy it.
Exactly. And I know that we're not the cheapest game in town, but we really try to take the time to, because we really do care about our clients and we want to see where they want to go.
Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, we wanted to get you back into getting stronger, because that was a big goal you had. You wanted to get back into pull-ups and stuff like that.
Yep.
And you weren't able to at the time because of your shoulder.
Yep.
And then we couldn't run very much and squat stuff because of your groin and stuff like that.
Yep.
But how's that been going for you now?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, I was just started doing, as you know, like starting doing pull-ups again, maybe like a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
And it's just been so nice to get back into it. I've been doing these like archer push-ups, which my shoulder would have not been able to handle that.
6 months ago, you could not do that.
At all. And so, and also like, I mean, I remember you helped me kind of assess my running style.
Yes.
And so I based on that, I've done some changes. So again, the hips don't bother me as much when I run. So
that's good.
So yeah.
It's funny because, and I think you've nailed it all, where we just try to do a whole body approach.
Exactly.
And because it's like, I don't know, your shoulder doesn't live in isolation. Your quad or your groin doesn't live in isolation.
Yeah.
And so if we treat the human body in parts, I think we start missing things, and then you start coming back for other things, which is a problem.
Yeah. Well, and one thing also that I find that your approach was really helpful is, remember like the first session we had, or when I committed to doing like the full package, like you sat me down and you had this like whiteboard where you kind of had squiggly lines like from low to high, right?
Yes.
Which reminded me of crypto, which I'm into that. But it was like, it just helped set the expectation that there will be setbacks. And people say that, but like seeing that like visually just was like, okay, like there will be setbacks. And we had a huge setback. I mean, in my journey here, I had an accident where I had a really bad bench that I invest in good equipment, people. But basically like I was doing incline, whatever it's called.
Incline press.
Incline press. Yeah. And the latch on the back basically did not do it properly. And I basically fell with like 80 pounds of weight and flipped backwards and almost injured myself, like to a point that like would have been dangerous. And so like that was in the middle of our training session. But again, like that would have probably put me, I would have been, like, stopped doing anything for 6 months just because I felt, oh, I'm injured now. I have to kind of, but within like a week, I was back into it. And even like a day afterwards, I was still doing things, but just modified.
Yeah. It's funny because when you called me about that, I mean, you were really distressed.
Yeah.
Number one. But number two, I think walking you away from the cliff,
Yeah.
talking away within cliff was good. And I know that a lot of people out there with chronic injuries do get sometimes anxious about, oh my God, is this going to set me back? Because you've been dealing with something for so long. But thankfully, within that week, you got better, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
great. I don't think I even saw you. I think you were like away or
Yeah,
something.
I mean, I didn't come in until like a week later, but even like right away, like your assistant Megan, who's also great, gave me the shockwave in the back
Yeah.
and the needling. And again, I was surprised how quickly I was able to just like get back into it. Yeah.
Well, I kind of wonder too, because you've been building quite a bit of strength, and I think you've developed a lot of resilience by building up that strength over time.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why you actually felt better too.
Well, I mean, I'm sure like because this happened like maybe like 7 weeks into our project, our program. Had this happened, I mean, I had developed some more core strengths. I had developed more shoulder mobility.
Yeah.
Like all these things, I think prevented a worse injury.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's funny because I would say that and I'm glad you talked about the squiggly line.
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't been through our what we do towards the end of our talk when we meet with our clients for the first time is that we talk about expectations versus reality. And I think we all, and myself included, we all expect progress to be linear.
Yes.
And things you do this and then this happens. But that's just not life, and that is not recovery or rehab.
Yes.
And there will be ups and downs in that process, especially as we try to go through our phase one, which is getting people out of their acute pain, retraining the brain to be able to acquire new habits of movement. And that just takes time because you've been doing this, you've been living you or doing you for 40 years or so.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take some time to actually undo some of that and reprogram you and your brain to be able to acquire new kinds of skills.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, like you have all the, you're the expert here, but like you have all these assessments that you can kind of see how you're unlearning and learning. So I remember when it would come into the first couple sessions, Jerry would like put a little marker in my knee and then
TFL
ask,
test, yes.
yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. There's something like objective that that I don't have to think about that can tell Jerry if I'm actually making progress or not. So in also some ways like, I'm not doing it right or wrong. It's like my body will let him know if I'm doing it right or wrong. And like, that's that. So it's also nice to have that.
I'm glad you said that because I think that when you're in a situation like the traditional model where you can't do that, it's hard to like actually say if a patient's getting better or not. But we try to reassess every single session to make sure we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have to kind of replan things because if you're not getting better, we have sort of an expectation of how long it takes for people to get out of their acute phase, which is typically, I'd say on average 2 to 8 visits, depending on the person, how long they've had something for. And so if we can't measure those things as we go each session, then we're really kind of shooting in the dark.
Yeah. Well, it's reassuring as a patient, to be able to kind of say, okay, well, like, as Tony from P90X says, do their best and forget the rest. Like, I'm relying on you and your team to let me know how I'm doing. I just have to focus on doing the effort.
Yes.
And so it's nice to have that partnership.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, how do you think that our model has been a little bit different as far as our treatment style versus maybe traditional PTs?
Well, as I mentioned, like the shock wave, the dry needling, that was something that I had never seen any kind of PT. And like that really blew me away. It's like, oh, cool. Like my mom's an acupuncturist, so I was used to acupuncture.
Yeah.
And I had done acupuncture for injuries, but not in the context of PT. The other thing is like I really like the fact that you have such a nice, like you have a gym in your place. So like I can do the activities with you, so I'm learning them.
Yes.
You take pictures so I can actually go back and see the pictures. So like the way you incorporate technology, the way you incorporate alternative approaches, and of course, excellent just like bedside manners, like, just you care about your patients, you and your entire team, like you feel like you're here for us, which again, emotionally, that is huge.
Huge, definitely. And I think especially guys in particular where maybe they don't want to admit that they're having issues and they're used to kind of clamming up because, they oftentimes are providers for their family and they want to sort of have that manliness about them. I think sometimes what gets missed is that, talking about our vulnerable issues sometimes. And when you have somebody who can support you in that, which is why I love F3, and being in community with other guys who also are on that same journey, I think that is part of the therapeutic process.
100%. And I think like that's part of it, like it's the body, mind, and soul, I think kind of come together in this environment.
Oh, I like that. Body, mind, and soul. So, Andres, I think the other thing I want to talk about is how we transitioned you from our physio side and physical therapy into more of the training aspect, because one of your goals was, I want to get back into doing these things that require weight, and you want to get stronger.
Yes.
You also want to lose body fat too.
Yes. Well, I think for me, like I had always like poo-pooed, like not poo-pooed, like I had ignored or been afraid of using weights because of the injuries.
Yes.
So that's why I had always mostly stuck to my own body weight. So like doing pushes and pull-ups. But it's because I never had proper training or support from somebody to do it. And again, so it's almost like the best of both worlds. Like you have a personal kind of trainer person, somebody has that skill set, but that can also has the physiotherapy approach. So like
Yes.
I love that combination.
Hybrid, yeah.
Exactly. And so I felt like very comfortable learning, like being coached on how to do certain activities. And once I began to learn my techniques, like, okay, I can just do this and repeat them. And then every few weeks we would tweak it and adjust it, or if something happened, but it gave me a framework that I could follow. Like once you have clarity, it's easy for people to follow. And
Absolutely.
so like having a clarity that we created together helped me. And so nowadays, like, I mean, like I'm looking forward to like using my dumbbells or,
That's
like,
great.
and like my home gym that I'll hopefully set up in the near future as I move to another country.
That's right. We're gonna miss you, by the way. I will miss you at least.
I'll miss you too.
It's funny because I would say that, and I've mentioned this before on other episodes, but in the longevity research, and if you look at anything from Dr. Peter Attia, what we know is that the more strength that we have in our younger years, and that could be wherever you're starting, maybe you're 30 or 40 or 50, I don't know. And what we know is that if we can add load, add muscle to our frames, the likelihood of us becoming or staying independent and mobile when we're 70 and 80 is very, very high. And so for me, I was an endurance athlete for most of my life. And I started taking up lifting very seriously about 2 years ago. And now I'm getting back into endurance stuff, but going with a different sort of foundation. And I'm running faster and harder than I ever have, which is interesting.
Nice.
And at the same time, I'm also not wrecking myself and always being tired from doing cardio all the time. So I think I've finally found this balance for myself personally. And I think you're on that track as well.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, and the way you share the story also makes me think about something that I guess is unique to our experience here is that the way you talk about the research, like you bring this like science-based approach. And remember, like in our sessions, you kind of talk about, this article said this, or, something about the ankle or whatever. Like you're able to bring in your experience in Colombia and other places to really kind of do that, which again, as somebody who's perhaps nervous to kind of explore this, like it brings credibility to what you're doing. So it's not just like the nice human-centered approach, but also the science backing.
Yeah. It's funny because I have found that this is my 22nd or 23rd year, I think, in practice. And I still love what I do. I still get curious about how to help people. And I've told this to other new grads, like the way that you get confident and the way that you gain trust very quickly with your patient is that you got to be curious about what's going on with them. And that curiosity will drive you to look at the research and drive you to find out more information because we don't have all the answers all the time. I still have things I have to look up sometimes because I'm getting old, but also because I also want to stay above what's going on right now and always be fresh on other things, other technologies that we can bring to practice that will help to elevate our game clinically and also create a bigger moat around us versus other traditional PT practices.
Well, I think that's also, again, like, you care about this, you care about other people, and like that's different than just going to any PT who's like, it's just a job for them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like when you care about what you do, because it's almost like it's an art form. It's a science and an art form that you really invest your life into, like perfecting. That comes across, and that you can see the impact.
That's cool. And I'm so glad you said that because my life goal, especially as I'm getting older now, has been how many more lives can I impact personally, and how many more lives can my practices also impact other lives? Because we're in Cary, we're in Cliff Lake, New Jersey, and I'm Montclair, New Jersey. And I'm thinking like, wow, if we have more like-minded people among our team members, and how many more lives can we impact in the communities? How much better care can we provide than the traditional PT approach?
Well, I think, life's hard and the world's pretty intense right now. And I think, again, if we're not feeling well physically, emotionally, but especially physically, we can't be aligned. Like I'm much more likely to snap at my kids and be angry at them if I have a pain because I'm spending energy trying to like cope with the pain. So if we're able to kind of physically feel okay and feel well, we can be more patient with each other. We can find time to enjoy other things. So I think it's, the impact that it has, it's huge.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that because I think a lot of parents out there, both, fathers and mothers, we get caught up in taking care of our families and everyone around us, and we don't focus on ourselves, which is natural. But I think we become better parents and better human beings.
Yes.
Like you said, by taking care of our physical health, whether it means eating right.
Yep.
Because if you're putting garbage in yourself, I think we all know this.
Yes.
And yes, I do have my vices too. So don't get me wrong. But if most of the time I'm eating well, I'm getting enough protein.
Yep.
I'm lifting, I'm running, doing the things that keep my body in check.
Yep.
I know that I can be the best husband, father, and business owner that I can be.
And as a therapist, also plugging in also mental health and also spiritual health. So I mean, like it's just like health in general. Like if we have our health aligned, but really starting with our body and our mind, and our soul, all three, I would say. Like we got to how do we spend time to take care of those aspects during our routine? We can't be there for other people, our children, our partners, whoever it is, if we're not there for ourselves.
Definitely. And I think just because, and it's funny because you and I are both early risers,
Yes.
and I think we've joked about how when other people think of early, they think of like 8 a.m. I'm like, I've already had breakfast,
Yes.
my first lunch maybe, I don't know.
Oh,
And
man.
it's I think setting that tone for the day
Oh,
by
it's-
saying, hey, listen, I'm gonna take care of myself first,
Yes.
because I know that the rest of the day people are gonna rely on me,
Yeah.
so I got to be there for myself first.
And it's just hard. I mean, for anybody listening that probably has young kids, my kids are 5 and 7, like it's so unpredictable. Like, after
Oh my
day starts,
gosh,
after
yeah.
8, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to work out at 5. And it's like, no, something happens to the kids, something like unexpected. The car breaks down. And it's like, but if you do it from like 4 to 6, there's nobody awake except you in the house. I mean, I love that space.
Yeah. We actually did a talk for a group on work ergonomics and how to take care of yourself, because a lot of desk workers are at their desk all day. And I asked one of the attendees what their takeaway was, and what she said was, I think it was great to be reminded that we make excuses all the time for why we can't stand up, but we have wireless headphones now. We can take calls.
Yes.
We can walk around our space.
Yes.
So it was a good reminder for them that, like, I don't have to, I'm not glued to my chair. No one's taking me prison to stay in this chair. But just getting movement in throughout their day, that might be your first start of getting yourself back in check.
Yeah. And I actually have started doing that. I mean, that was one thing you recommended for me, like doing a standing desk thing.
Yeah.
And actually, and shifting positions every half an hour, every hour, like, so going to sitting down or standing up. I also started kind of taking some calls while walking. So yeah, I mean, these are the small things that you can start including, which make an impact.
Yeah, and I think that I'm glad you said that, because sometimes people think to make an impact, you have to take these massive steps. But I'm going to say, and that's with like any kind of like weight loss program or anything out there, it's the small steps consistently over time that make the biggest impact overall.
Yeah, so I mean, so I teach leadership development at Georgetown, and I use one of the books I use is called Switch: How to Change What Changes Hard. Have you read that book? By any chance?
It sounds like a good though.
It's a great book, and I mean, they take the premise of a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt, and he says that the human being, our brain basically functions like we have an elephant and a rider on top of the elephant. The rider on top of the elephant is like the intellectual analytical part. The elephant is the emotional part. And so what happens is when you're trying to create change, like getting better, like creating new habits, like losing weight, you can't just appeal to the rider. Like intellectually, we know what we have to do.
Yeah.
But think about the difference between an elephant and a human being. Like who has more strength?
Yes.
The elephant would just like crush us.
Of course.
So we have to appeal to the emotion. And one of the things that happens with change is that elephants, our emotional side, gets afraid of making big changes. So you have to shrink the change. That's one of the things. So
Shrink the change.
So it's one of the things I highly recommend it. But I think these things apply not just to like physical, but like change management, which is that's why the connection I made to that.
Yeah, that's huge. Do you find that the principles that you live by for your health then carry over right into work then?
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. I mean, I think when you're able to kind of build discipline, perseverance, when you're able to kind of also learn flexibility and adapt. Like I mean, the body's a great metaphor for life. If we're rigid, we're going to get more injured. If we're rigid at work with people, et cetera, we're going to be less agile. And in this world that's so volatile, you need to have a skill set to be able to be resilient, to be strong, to be flexible.
I really like how you said that. I'm going to have to use that.
We're recording, luckily.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Posterity.
Yes.
So, Andres, thank you so much for the great conversation. As always, I'm just grateful for having a friend like you in my life.
Likewise.
Can you talk about, like, if somebody were on the fence about maybe coming into Next Level, what do you think that you would tell them to put them over the edge to want to make that choice to come see us?
I mean, I would say you offer a free assessment, which is 20 minutes. And in that free assessment, you'll get to see all the things we're talking about. You'll see the values in action of the human-centered approach. You'll see the great, nice, clean equipment. You'll see the smiles. Jerry will joke with you. He has a great sense of humor. His team as well. I mean, I think you'll get that very quickly. And yeah, like it is an investment. So just be prepared to know, like, okay, how much money do I want to invest in this? But again, Tony Robbins says that change happens when the pain of the status quo is more than the pain of change. And so if you've been, with pain for a while, you haven't recovered in months and years, which was happening to me, I said, you know what? I know it might be an investment, but like I've been doing this. I'm tired of the status quo. I'm tired of just like getting re-injured every 6 months. Let me try something new. And luckily, that I took the steps. So I would just say, get the free assessment, get a feel for yourself of the culture, of the vibe, of the technology, of everything here, and just make the investment.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Finally, what are like maybe 1, 2, or maybe even 3 words that come to mind when you think of Next Level and our team?
That's not your logo. Move, excel, inspire. I would say caring, agile, and funny. Like you all have a great sense of humor. You're very personable.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Andres, thanks so much for your time. And for our audience out there, hope that was helpful in helping you make the right decision for yourself and your health. And you F3 guys out there, if you are on the fence, hopefully people like Happy and people like Discount.
And I should also give credit that I'm here because Zero Drop, speaking of F3, Zero Drop worked with you over a year ago, and he gave you a shout out in the Slack channel.
Oh, he did?
And that's how I learned about you. So a shout out to Zero Drop, who helped me get here.
Thank you, Zero Drop. Awesome. Thank you again.
All right, thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.